Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our first community coffee hour of 2022. If you would like to do some chat box introductions, feel free to put your name, your mentoring program or organization that you're here with, and your role, and we will kind of do introductions that way this morning. So for those of you who may not be familiar, we are Mentor Virginia. Our mission is to foster quality mentoring relationships that empower, elevate, and encourage young people throughout our state. We offer a range of services that help us meet this mission, from training. We provide AmeriCorps Vista volunteers to help build capacity in mentoring programs. We do no-cost consulting, and we have what's called the National Quality Mentoring System that helps programs assess how well they are adhering to national best practice standards in their program. I am joined by some of my team members today. I didn't quite get a chance to see who all of us are here in the meeting, but we do have a great team. I know that T is here. She may be helping out with some of the meeting logistics today, so you might see her pop up. She is our training and DEI programs manager, and I am Sarah Wilkinson, our programs manager. So happy to have everybody here today. We also have a great team of consultants. Some of you may have met some of the folks that are on the screen. Two of our consultants are trainers, and then all 8 are also TA providers for us. So they do our consulting services. Today's topic is compassion, fatigue, and self-care. If you want to let us know what about this topic interested you and brought you to this meeting today, or if you have any specific questions that you want to make sure that we answer throughout today's session, please feel free to utilize the chat for that purpose this morning. And really, without further ado, we'll get right to the meat and potatoes this morning. I'm very excited to introduce Dreamel Spady, LCSW. So she is here with us today and will be leading our session. So she is a licensed clinical social worker and owner of Renewal, Growth, and Healing. She has a Bachelor of Social Work from Virginia Union University and a Master of Social Work from Virginia Commonwealth University. She's a lifelong community leader, and she's been involved in many community and professional organizations, currently with the Virginia Behavioral Health Advisory Council. She's been a probation officer and a clinical director in previous roles, and has also worked with military families, those battling drug and alcohol addiction, survivors of domestic and sexual violence, and is currently, on top of everything that she's already doing, training to become an emergency responder and public safety clinical provider and a grief recovery method specialist. In her private practice, her areas of expertise include stress, anxiety, depression, grief and loss, relationship challenges, and family conflict and trauma. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and give Dreamel the chance to come on and get us going.
Hey, good morning. Can y'all hear me? Nice. Yes, great. Okay. Hey, good morning, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank y'all so much.
She said she could help there. She said no.
I'm sorry. Hold on. I don't know. Is that me?
No, you're fine.
I'll get everything muted for you.
Yeah, we got it.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm like, well, thank you so much, Sarah, for the introduction. Thank y'all so much for having me. Let me first say happy Mentoring Month to everyone here. I know that everyone here has, is obviously in some mentoring capacity. So want to definitely start off with that. So I think I saw where someone mentioned to feel free to come in the chat. I'm going to open mine here so I can move it over to the side and be able to see some of the comments and kind of manage the screen here. So again, thank you all so much for having me. I know that we only have an hour, and Sarah and I talked about trying to cram such an important and relevant topic into an hour. So I'm going to kind of dive in a little bit, but I'll tell you a little bit about the format. I would like for us to be able to have some very open and candid and transparent discussions as we're going through the topic today. We obviously have an agenda. However, again, I'm certainly comfortable with kind of veering off of that and just ask that people will do the raise hand feature, use that, definitely use the chat, and obviously feel free to come off mute and talk. Definitely want this to be interactive and not super duper formal. I certainly prefer being in person. I like human interaction. So I've been doing trainings and workshops, obviously, for the past almost 2 years, virtually. So kind of getting used to it. But I will say I definitely like for people to talk back and talk amongst each other as we're doing the training and the workshop. So we'll just kind of dive in. So I talked to, Sarah and I were talking about compassion fatigue and how this is such a very relevant, an important topic. However, it's one of the things that I think many organizations and agencies tend to overlook and dismiss as it relates to trainings. We talk about a lot of, subject matters and things like that, and the things focusing on self-care and trying to make sure we take care of ourselves tend to sometimes get swept under the rug. So definitely glad that we're highlighting this today. Let me see here. Sarah, are you all able to see the PowerPoint or no? Well, okay.
They should be able to now.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. So I guess just from an introduction standpoint, obviously we know that I was thinking about this last night. I was talking to someone about mentoring and just the concept of mentoring. And I think that the helping profession tend to dismiss how stressful and challenging mentoring can be. We obviously talk about first responders, you got firefighters and police officers and therapists and people who are, considered to be quote unquote on the front line of stress and trauma. And I think that a lot of times we dismiss how exposed mentors can be to trauma. Obviously, we open our minds and our hearts. Most of our career is dedicated to helping people who are very vulnerable and who is often plagued with a lot of risk factors and, trauma and drama and conflict and all the other adversities that are around us. So wanted to talk a little bit about just kind of what you think you're experiencing as it relates to compassion fatigue, how it's impacting you, how it shows up for you, how you see it with other colleagues and coworkers. One second, let me move this over. And how I think we need to highlight how we're not immune to that emotional pain that, again, oftentimes people who are on the front line of trauma tend to be exposed to. So I want to just look, Sarah, if you can go to there we go, right there. So obviously Sarah is managing the slide. So y'all will hear me saying, go Sarah, meaning to go to the next slide. So want to first, start off with the definition of compassion fatigue. And many of us have often heard vicarious traumatization, obviously in the field and different trainings and things like that. But it's one of those terms that we tend to throw around, but don't really dive into as much as we could and should. We're talking about secondary exposure. Secondary exposure, because we know that in our work, we're hearing, sometimes seeing, and being exposed to mentees who are talking about trauma and stressors that they have experienced or are experiencing. I did want to kind of talk a little bit about how it's different from burnout, but I'm sure that will come up as we get to some of the signs and symptoms and risk factors. I'm sure that part is going to come up. But as we're talking about what it feels like and what it's like to be overwhelmed and sometimes stressed and boggled down and burdened by that exposure, I wanted to make sure that we take some time to highlight that. So we'll be breaking out into breakout groups, having some great discussions. And again, hopefully some folks can report back some of the things that we have been experiencing or think that we're being exposed to. Sarah, go Sarah. So let's kind of kick off with talking about the signs and symptoms of compassion fatigue. Not going to go over all of them, but do want to just highlight just a couple of things, and then we'll kind of go out into a breakout session and come back. So looking at the signs and symptoms of compassion fatigue, very, very, very similar and tends to mimic depression and anxiety and obviously burnout. But headaches, definitely something that some people have already been experiencing prior to coming into the field. or again, one of the things that I think we tend to dismiss and underestimate because we think it may be related to something else. One of the things I definitely wanted to highlight was about judgment being impaired and about social disconnection and disengagement. So when, obviously people are contacting us, hey, do you want to do this weekend? It gets to be late at night and we're not even open or inclined to responding to text messages because we're so boggled down. And the other things, again, I'm not going to go over all of them because I want us to kind of come back and report out, is low sex drive, change in appetite, which could obviously be overeating or having suppressed appetite, avoiding working with certain mentees. So obviously when you get ready to work with someone and you're learning a little bit more about what they are experiencing and what, I guess kind of led to you being connected with them, kind of feeling disconnected or less inclined to connect with them because of some of the challenges that they may be facing, particularly if it's related to abuse or neglect, particularly sexual abuse or physical abuse in the home, or if you know that they've been exposed to some other type of trauma that would be challenging to deal with. Go Sarah, if you can, it's one more on the other slide, the next slide that I wanna, yes. Poor job satisfaction and job performance is another one that I just want people to highlight before we go out into the breakout session. So as we're looking at this list or long list of signs and symptoms of compassion fatigue, kind of highlighting some of the things that we may be experiencing, have experienced, I want to kind of go into the breakout session and just get people to have some discussion around how these things may show up for you. And if you think it's related to compassion fatigue or something else, and particularly around compassion fatigue, if you think that you're able to notice that in the moment, or if someone else tends to bring that to your attention. And that could obviously be a colleague, that also could be, someone in your personal life, a child or a partner or a parent. So Sarah, if we can kind of go out into the breakout sessions, I want folks to be able to have some discussion around the signs and symptoms. Again, I'm hoping that folks will feel comfortable being transparent and sharing if you are experiencing any of the signs and symptoms, and if you think it's related to the secondary exposure to our work. And so then obviously I think I will have an opportunity to kind of peek my head into some of the groups. I'm pressing my button here to be able to go to the next. So being able to look at, and Sarah's putting here in the chat, if you or your colleagues are showing any of these signs, and being able to talk a little bit about that. When we come back, I would like for people to be able to talk a little bit about some of the common signs and some of the themes that we may have heard in our group. So Sarah, if we can go ahead and break out into the groups, that'll be great.
Okay, I will work on getting that going right now.
And most people are probably familiar with this part of Zoom and our virtual world.
Yes, okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and open the rooms. And we'll see you all here in about somewhere between 7 and 10 minutes.
Yes.
Sarah.
Yes.
Good morning, ladies. Sorry, I am running a few minutes late, dealing with some maintenance issues in my apartment. Can someone give me a brief update about what the activity we're doing is? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So do you see any of the questions in the chat? If not, I can drop them in there if you came in after that was dropped.
I do not. I am so sorry.
No, that's okay. I hope your I hope your maintenance is okay. Doesn't sound like a fun way to start the morning.
It's ongoing.
All right. Do you see the questions that are there now?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. So it's really just a conversation to kind of start to dig into how compassion fatigue is showing up for people.
Got it. Okay. Let me copy this, and then I think you already put me in a room. So
Yes, looks like you're room 2.
And Sarah, it looks like I can go to room 4.
Yes, if you would like.
Oh, okay.
Mhm,
I'll
Alright,
jump
that's up
into
to you.
room 2 to follow behind Chanel in case anyone in that room has any questions.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And I
Okay, welcome back, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and Dreamel is going to help us sort of debrief the conversations that y'all just had in your breakout room.
Yeah. So, sound like y'all were having some good discussions. I had a chance to kind of briefly peek into some of the rooms. And I heard some things that definitely indicate that we are not immune to, compassion fatigue and the emotional pain that comes with working with people who are experiencing trauma and depression and anxiety and the long list of other challenges. I also heard a lot about we're under a lot of pressure right now, obviously due to the pandemic, the lingering pandemic as it continues, obviously. So I would love to hear some report out around how people think compassion fatigue, some of those signs and symptoms. Again, due to time, we aren't going over all of them, but we did highlight a few, or they were obviously on the PowerPoint there. Wanted to hear back. So I know there were a couple of breakouts. I jotted down a couple of names and stuff that I know from. So I know, Becca, you were in group 1. I guess if you or anybody else that was in the group with you want to report out about what y'all think you are experiencing, what you're seeing with other people that you work with.
We talked a lot about how it affects us from like our different perspectives, because we're each coming from different types of mentoring experiences. Someone was coming from a place where he's handling multiple different mentoring agencies and things, and he has to deal a lot with relocating or allocating resources and trying to figure out how to kind of triage who gets what. And that was kind of similar to my experience, but less with resources and more with a lack of mentors, because the length of our wait list is just very intense. And then, so a lot of us are experiencing that feeling of we want to help everybody and we just can't.
Yeah.
And one of the people in our breakout room was just saying she wants to take everyone home with her because we just want to help them all. And I think that is kind of where it tends to hit us the most, is just that struggle of who do you help? Because they all need it. Everyone needs it, or they wouldn't be coming to your program. But there's not enough, for us, there's not enough mentors. For some people, there's not enough resources. So I think that stress just weighs a little bit more heavily. We didn't speak so much specifically about the signs and symptoms, just kind of about where we're getting our compassion fatigue from.
Okay, gotcha. No, I think that's a really good, it all kind of it's all related, still all related. And it sounds like you talked a lot about us having really big hearts. And, unfortunately, like you said, there's a lot of people who are in need. There's a high demand, and again, due to limited resources, staff shortages, it's a number of things that, goes hand in hand with that. And unfortunately, that's not new. However, the pandemic obviously throws a whole nother monkey wrench and list of challenges as it relates to meeting the need. So thanks for reporting out about that. What about group 2 or room 2? Melissa, you and your crew? Is Melissa still here?
Yes, sorry, I was having trouble unmuting.
Oh, no problem.
So we talked, I think, a lot in our group about the symptoms and which symptoms we're experiencing. And the same thing, that there's a lot of, I didn't get all of my to-do list done today, and then it bleeds into the next day, and it just piles up, and feeling anxious and overwhelmed and fatigued and depressed about just not being able to get or feeling like you're not getting everything done that you need to get done to be able to help the people that you serve.
Right. Okay. So just really feeling overwhelmed and feeling like the to-do list is never ending.
Right.
You leave work and it's, most things are incomplete, and you come back the next day and things are already added to it before you clock
Yes.
in. And then you open your email and you check your voicemail, and the list that's already really lengthy grows. And then it's Friday. And for people who are like, oh, I try to do my admin stuff on Friday. Well, that doesn't, that usually doesn't happen. And then,
No.
we want to be able to, use the weekend as a time to recharge our battery, right? And again, hopefully we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about risk factors, but depending on what your life and your lifestyle looks like, weekend doesn't, ends up not being a good recharge time either. And you blink and guess what? It's Monday again. It's Monday again, and the list has grown even more. So, right, spot on with that. Okay, good point.
May I put somebody on the spot really quickly? I was also in a group too, and Chanel made up a really good point about how she judges herself for some of her behaviors. And I was just hoping she'd be able to share that for just a moment.
Way to put me on the spot, but yes. Yeah, I think shortened version, I think often I'm struggling with, in addition to not getting my to-do list done, sometimes either questioning or being disappointed in myself for some of my reactions to situations, knowing that we've been trained and I've done so much personal work to, kind of rise above certain circumstances and let certain things roll off your back. But with, so many things hitting you from multiple directions, sometimes it's like, wait, was that a tone? What did that sound like a tune? Did I snap at somebody?
Mm-hmm.
Do I have to now go back and apologize? And so then, it kind of spirals, all of the things, the emotions then add to the to-do list.
Oh yeah, and definitely, irritability and, change in mood, and those things are definitely, can be some of the signs and symptoms. As you're sharing that, it reminds me, it was probably about two, maybe 3 weeks ago. I'm really big into graphic tees, and I was in the store, I had on this t-shirt, and it says, be kind. And then in really small print under that, it says to yourself. And this woman that was in the store, that was in the line with me, she turned around, she said, I needed to see that. And so at first I didn't know what she was talking about. And she said, your shirt, I needed to see that. And I said, oh, great. I'm glad I could be a poster for you. But yeah, being kind to yourself is definitely something that, I hope comes up when we are talking about just kind of how to combat and how do we kind of overcome the compassion fatigue. So thank you for sharing that, Chanel. And I'm sure some other people can resonate, with that. So what about group 3? Let me remember who was in that group. Tuesday, you and your crew. Anybody else that was in the group with you?
Yes, that's like the beauty of having a unique name. People remember it.
I love it. I love it. And I love it. And I love the I at the end. I'm like, yes, gotta call on her.
Thank you. So we really kind of talked about, well, I think we spent a lot of our time talking about how the effects of compassion fatigue kind of pour into our personal lives, where we don't feel like communicating or responding to like text messages from friends and family. We kind of just want to come home from work, kind of debrief, eat, and then sleep, and kind of get up and be ready and prepared to do it again the next day. But we also talked briefly about some of the different signs that we each experienced. Avoiding mentees, job satisfaction, and then I can't remember what the last one said. Sorry, Jessica.
Calling your crew, ask them to chime in.
Sorry,
who was in the
Jessica.
group.
What was it that she said? I couldn't remember.
No, it's okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just talked about how like there's just a lot of guilt, like the populations that we work with, just like wanting to take everybody home, like somebody's already said, and just kind of feeling like it's never enough. Like, I'm never going to be able to do enough.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we were definitely touching on that. Earlier we were just kind of leading into the discussion and talking about how big our hearts are. And obviously, the compassion and the passion that we have for people and helping people is obviously, what led us to this field and, to this career path. Unfortunately, compassion fatigue is the cost of caring. And obviously, we work with, and I heard someone earlier, I think it was Melissa mentioning about like just the volume, it may have been Kim, the volume of the demand. Obviously we have, particularly when it comes to youth, but from youth to geriatrics, I mean, we have tons of people right now who could use some support. And I think it's very relevant to think about how compassion fatigue is very, there's a lot of reciprocity with that. As you're saying, Tuesday, our career and our work life spills over into personal, but then personal spills over into our work life. Because obviously what we do know is everyone whose face is shown on the screen looks really, really beautiful. And, I'm sure people are saying, if I looked like what I was going through, not went through, but going through, then, but I mean, obviously we know that they go hand in hand. We take work home and we take home to work. Sometimes we obviously try to, as we say, check it at the door, but that's not very easy. We're dealing with grief, we're dealing with divorce, we're dealing with, other family conflict and, challenges with our kids, or, and obviously that list can go on in terms of personal challenges that spill over into our work. So definitely goes hand in hand. Group 4. Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead, Tuesday. Come back off.
I was just going to say one thing that I kind of share with my group is how I've been dealing with the toll of compassion fatigue, possibly some depression, and then like a little bit of burnout. I just started seeing a therapist myself because it's so important that I have a place to unload as well. I can't just take it all in and not have a place to pour out. So.
Great. Good for you. I see Chanel with the heart on the screen saying kind of yay, like, yes, love it, right? And obviously, again, I have mine on full screen, so I'm not sure if everyone's able to see the comments. But yeah, so make sure that we, you can probably see some of the comments in here where people are obviously kind of responding to that. So I know that we were talking earlier about just kind of cramming it, and I know we're pushing for time. So if anybody else in particular wanted to make sure that they had something they were dying to share from, that discussion from the breakout, please feel free to come off mute and share. But otherwise, we're going to move on to our next segment. And again, I know, and again, feel free as we're going through to kind of put some stuff in the chat.
We did have a question from Kim, it looks like, in the chat. If we want to, I don't know if you want to respond to that now or later, that says, I may be the only non-professional mentor on the call, a volunteer mentor. Perhaps compassion fatigue adds to the lack of mentors. Do volunteer mentors need training regarding compassion fatigue? I personally think that, I personally and professionally think that compassion fatigue could probably be a requirement, but definitely a must attend for anyone who is in the helping profession. I mentioned earlier, I think that a lot of times when we think about helping professionals, we think about teachers and therapists and, police officers. And I think sometimes mentors are dismissed, particularly those who are volunteering. And I definitely think that we don't always uphold the value of mentors and how valuable, mentors can be, but also around how much mentors are exposed to trauma and stress. I definitely think that it would be something that, could be part of a training curriculum that's, it's part of the agency and organization, or obviously something that,
agencies like Mentor Virginia can make sure that it's, available for mentors and mentees. I mean, I'm sure most people would nod and sign off and say, oh, sure. As I'm even hearing people today talk about the overlap of compassion fatigue with anxiety and depression, and, so yeah, I would totally stamp that. Let's take a quick poll. Sarah, can you pull the poll up? I want to kind of talk a little bit about, well, first we'll kind of do the poll. And if everyone can just indicate on here, currently I am experiencing compassion fatigue. Not at all, a little bit, somewhat sometimes, and a lot often. And Kim, this will probably answer that question as well. And again, the good thing about, being able to have forums like this is this isn't what the research says. This is live people who are on the screen with you right now, sharing their personal experience and telling you exactly, what they're experiencing, what signs and symptoms they see, how they're impacted by the stress and by the exposure. And it looks like the majority of folks are saying somewhat, sometimes. And that's probably a very common, sometimes, somewhat, sometimes. And that probably depends on the day, the week, how your personal life is going, those things. So I want to kind of shuffle a little bit. Sarah, can you go to the slide that talks about risk factors? All right. So I heard this kind of throughout when people were sharing from the other breakout room. And we were talking about some of the things that kind of impact how exposed and to what degree we are exposed and to what degree the impact is. And these are just some of the risk factors that tend to come into play, because as we looked at currently who and how much we're experiencing compassion fatigue, what type of factors and variables tend to come into play with that. Earlier, I think someone mentioned about having a challenging job. So obviously it's a big difference, depending on how challenging the job is, far as, the volume of work that you have, how many mentees you're working with, what that ratio looks like, what type of setting you're working with. It's a big difference working with very, very young children versus adolescents versus young adults. What type of situations and presenting problems. So obviously we know there's a difference with working with folks who may be having some challenges with academics versus someone who is being sexually abused in their home, or who's, coping with the divorce of their parents. I think it's very important to kind of highlight some of those things. So again, for sake of time, we won't go over all of them. But as the screen is up, I would like to hear, particularly around supervision and work-related support. What do y'all kind of see to be some of the buffers that help, where you can say, you know what, I am at risk of compassion fatigue, again, just due to the nature of the work, but these are some of the factors that tend to help to prevent or kind of dispel some of that. So again, just kind of highlighting some of the risk factors or protective factors.
So I think for me, having in the position that I'm in right now, having a really supportive supervisor has made a world of difference.
Yeah.
Having someone who has confidence in my abilities, having someone who is ready to let me try something new and prepared to back me, whether I succeed or whether I fail, that reduces so much stress, because it takes a lot of the pressure off. And it makes me feel like I'm in an environment where I can succeed, even if I need to fail first.
Mhm. Yeah, I think people who are in leadership also tend to, um, dismiss that, how their leadership style and how supportive they can be, how aware and insightful and attentive they are to the people who are on their team, how much and how valuable that can be in terms of helping to curb and combat compassion fatigue. Carol, I see your hand is up.
I was going to say my supervisor, I've been on the
Mhm.
job 6 months as of today, and the trust factor that I have, that my supervisor and actually my whole company has in its employees is something I've never felt before, that they trust us to do our jobs. It's like they trust that they hired the person to do the job and they trust you to
Yeah.
do it. And that right there is just so freeing. And
Mhm.
then my support at work, my team that I supervise, we have each other's backs. And so if one of us has an issue where one of the people in our program is just weighing us down or there's a problem, we know that we can go to each other, and it's not seen that we're failing, or that I'm not, if one of the people in my department come to me and say, I'm having this problem, I'm not looking at them like, oh, you're failing at your job because of your this. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm glad you're coming to me. So the support that we have just within my team,
Oh, yeah.
and it was there before I got there. Like I said, I've only been there 6 months, so it was already fostered before I got there.
Oh,
And that
great.
is a company environment.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think that, like when we go on interviews and someone's saying like, hey, what are some things that's very important to you? I think that's one of the things that obviously we talk about things like benefits and all that stuff. We need to be talking about, is this a caring and supportive, environment that values work-life balance? And, what type of systems and supports are in place to be able to prevent, and combat compassion fatigue. So thanks for sharing that, Carol. Anyone else want to talk about any risk or protective factors that they think either leads to or helps to prevent and combat compassion fatigue? I think even in the chat, we saw a lot of people kind of saying ditto, or, kind of indicating that supervision. And I think, Carol, you hit it on the head. I think obviously supervisors for sure, and folks who are in leadership, but also, again, just the team as a whole, I think helps to contribute to that. So. And again, obviously, we want to kind of be able to shuffle along here. Yes, Kim, Kim, hold that. And when we go to this next little part, because I know we're kind of keeping my eye on the time. So the next part here is definitely where we want to be able to talk a little bit about that part. Sarah, can you go to that? Well, I guess, yeah, the prevention, early detection, and coping. There we go. All right. So as we're kind of in wrap up, this is kind of what a lot of people have been alluding to, even when we came back from the other breakout session, is how do we prevent and how do we cope? Tuesday, I heard you mention, you did mention that about recently starting therapy. And in Kim's comment in the chat is talking about personality styles and kind of our own personal toolbox of what are some of our natural coping skills. And are you a person who generally tends to cope well in general, or tend to experience anxiety or depression at a higher rate? So being able to think about some of those things are I think, very important. And for sake of time, we won't go out into the breakout session, but I do want us to have some discussion around what are we doing? So what we did indicate was that we know what the signs and symptoms are. We've indicated just with our group right here today that sometimes, somewhat, we are experiencing compassion fatigue. So what do we do about it? What do we do about it? How do we cope? How do we combat that? How do we conquer? Either think about what you are doing, should be doing, could be doing, to cope. When we just think about the state that we're in right now as it relates to stress, when we think about exposure, again, that secondary exposure, when we think about the mentees that we work with, our day-to-day life, what are some things that we're doing or could be doing to cope? Oh, Kendra, excellent. Learning how to set boundaries and saying no. Definitely one of those things that I think is easier said than done, but definitely one, I mean, boundaries is one of my favorite words. And one of the things that I've been doing that I started doing and then I kind of fell off and then I had to get back on in terms of setting boundaries is when I get off. So when I get off work, I usually have a ton of text messages that I haven't responded to and voicemails. And what I would normally do is talk to people on the way home. And, you know, I'm trying to catch up and I'm like, hey, you know, I was at work when you called, what's up? And, you know, then we talk all the way till I get home. And then I get home and I have, you know, I'm married, I have a 4-year-old, a very active 4-year-old. So obviously I get home and then there's that. And then I still haven't responded to these text messages. So usually I'm like, okay, all right, let me respond to so-and-so, let me respond to so-and-so. And I'm now in the habit of when I'm riding home, I don't return any phone calls. I take that time as a time to just kind of decompress and gather my thoughts before I get home and obviously need to mentally and physically prepare for my family. One of them, I also received a journal for Christmas. So that's one of the things that I've said that I wanted to start doing. So far, I've journaled once and a half. I journaled, what's today, Wednesday? I journaled last week and then I journaled on Monday night and I didn't finish. I see a lot of people in here talking about journaling. Taking time to exercise, meditate, reading. That was one of my things too, reading. I love reading and had really gotten away from it. No, I hadn't gotten away from it. You know what I do? I do a lot of scholarly reading. I don't leisure read anymore. I used to read all the time. I love reading. Hadn't been. T, you got your hand raised? You want to share? Come off mute.
I just read an article that Bill Gates takes 2 annual think weeks. They're not vacations. They are 7 days where he goes into isolation and he rests and he does whatever he wants and it regenerates him. It gives him the space to be creative. And that is what I'm aspiring to now. Creating space in my life to be able to take not a week vacation, but a think week.
Yes, yes. And again, it's all in just the way we think about it and conceptualize it, right? Yeah. And if you see here, like even on the PowerPoint, where just take time off. And what's the word? On a regular basis. It's no way that people should it gets to be December and they're saying, oh, I got all this time left. Clear indication that we haven't been taking care of ourselves. Or we feel like we have to have something to take off for a doctor's appointment, a dentist appointment. No, we can just, or obviously if you have a planned vacation, no, you can just say, nope, I'm taking off this week. I'm going to an Airbnb for about 3 days and I'm just going to chill and relax and read and eat snacks and, you know, have a think week or a think couple days. And obviously it doesn't have to even be a whole week, you know. Sometimes obviously our life doesn't really kind of, you know, allow us to take a whole week sometimes, but being able to kind of carve out sometimes where you're already saying, I plan to take X amount of days or, you know, X amount of hours every quarter or every month or every other month, being able to do that on a regular basis. I'm looking here in the chat. Y'all have a lot of good things going here in the chat. I hear I read here about the gratitude journal. Oh, one for work and one for, oh, great. I like that. One for personal and one for work. Good, 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 good. One thing I definitely wanted to point out was avoiding the habit of complaining with your colleagues. And I say that because I think that obviously if you have people that you trust, that you can be very candid with, you know, we can do that, and we want to be able to kind of have people to support us. At the same time, we want to just kind of have a balance where we don't find ourselves kind of getting into these gripe sessions where every time that I'm hanging out with, you know, Chanel, or, you know, I'm doing something with April, the whole time I'm just complaining about mentees or work or our supervisor. And where do we get, you know, the whole positive vibes? Not that you have to have positive vibes only all the time, but where do we strike the balance where I can come to you and kind of share some things transparently, but also finding some time to kind of highlight some positive things too? Because obviously we don't want to feed our mind and our heart just all, you know, all negativity. Kim, really great point about the EAPs. Great. Thank you so much for bringing it up. Somebody mentioned obviously therapy earlier, but making sure that we are using our EAP, which obviously gives us free sessions, you know, with therapists in our area. And again, that's wherever you live, you know, to be able to go to therapists free of charge for a select number of sessions. So really, really good. Yes. Just wanted to see if there is, and then I think on that very last slide, it kind of highlights a lot of what T was mentioning, just about having time to recharge, restore, refresh. How do we hit that refresh button? And obviously for all of us, that's going to be something different. But being able to talk it out transparently, I think is very important too, as I'm just looking here at more comments about therapy and journaling. And I know we only have like 4 more minutes. That time really flew. Really flew. So guess, let's see here, we gotta. All right. So did anyone have any, I guess, last minute just comments or things they wanted to share as we are in wrap up mode?
Dreamel, I definitely want to thank you for this really awesome session. I feel like we all needed this, this moment in time. There are so many valuable, just being able to hear that it's not just us. Like, I don't know if y'all had this experience, like knowing it's not just me, like listening to everybody talk and just sort of the things that we're trying to find a way through in this like very challenging moment in history that we find ourselves in right now. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your expertise this morning. And I do have a couple of sort of last minute announcement pieces here. So there is a survey link in your chat box. We do hope that you will let us know how this session was in your opinion. And as part of that, let us know what you want to continue to talk about throughout 2022. As we will continue to have these coffee hours every single month. And so we want to make sure that we're bringing topics and speakers that you want to hear from. Compassion fatigue came about from somebody saying in the survey that they wanted to talk about this. So we do read those and take that into account. February's community coffee hour is going to be around moving from mentoring to critical mentoring, and we will be celebrating Black History Month in February. So mark your calendars. That's going to be February 9th from 9 to 10 a.m. There is also a brand new resource that I wanted to bring to everybody's attention. This just launched this week from Mentor. It's called Becoming a Better Mentor, Strategies to Be There for Young People. This is one of the first, it's the first guide from Mentor that is specifically for mentors, because they almost always, all the resources that they put out are for program coordinators or program staff. This is the first guidebook that is just for mentors, and it digs into, there's just so much information packed into 12 chapters about all the different ways and things that mentors can do to support young people right now. So definitely encourage you to check out that brand new resource. We also are still, this is the last week to sign up for Capitol Hill Day for folks who want to kind of raise your voice and be part of advocating for continued federal support of mentoring and mentoring research, mentoring programs, all the good things that we need the federal government to support. So the last day to sign up will be this Friday. If you have any questions about that, you can feel free to reach out to me.
Cool.
Want to also mention too that you saw these faces at the beginning. We do have all of these lovely consultants on our team, and they are specifically here to work with you in your program on any of the things that you want to continue to work on. One of the things, for example, that they could work on with programs through our no-cost technical assistance program is building out compassion fatigue training for your mentors. So that is something that we could work on with our consultants through that program that we have. And then lastly, if y'all have not seen this yet, there is a brand new mentoring connector. So this is a place where your program can list and recruit mentors. And this is what we use. So when folks come to us looking for mentoring programs, we will search this too and send referrals to you. So just wanted to let you all know, if you haven't heard of this yet, there's a brand new system. They just refreshed it. It's beautiful, works really well. So be happy to share more information about how you can list your program in the Mentoring Connector and start recruiting that way. So that is all of our announcements for now. I appreciate everybody sticking around for the last couple of minutes just to hear that. If there are any final thoughts, comments, questions, happy to take those. But if not, thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much.